Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Hitwise and IMRG Planning for Christmas 2017 webinar. My name is Christian Martin. I'm the UK General Manager for Hitwise in the UK. Just to set expectations, the presentation today is going to take around about 40 minutes, and then there will be a 20-minute question and answer session after that. I believe that you'll be able to see a free text window on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you write down the questions that you have there, then my colleague will look at those questions and we'll talk through them after we've done the presenting. The goal for today is that we've taken a fair amount of data and we hopefully have produced some fairly valuable insights for our retailer clients. And if we can play a part in helping you have a more successful 2017 festive campaign, then that really is what we set out to achieve today. In terms of the number of delegates in the call, there's quite a few. There was about 850 registered across pretty much every facet of the retail industry. So what we would like to offer is, we've been as specific as we can on the presentation for the retail sector, but you'll have questions yourself for your own part of the retail industry, maybe on your own planning as well. And if you submit your questions to this address, we'll do our best to get back to you. Obviously, if you know your account manager and their email address or phone number, then get in touch with them directly. And like I said, we'll do the best we can to get back to you as quickly as possible. Okay, it's probably just worth spending a minute or two on who Hitwise is. We've been out of the Experian family for about 18 months now, and we're an independent company. We've evolved fairly quickly, so I thought it'd be useful just to have a quick recap. So I'm going to focus on the circles on the screen and start off on the left and go through to the right. So what Hitwise is probably historically and still best known for is the collection of premium data from software application providers. So we collect that data from them. It's nice, stable, robust sample of about 3 million people, 3 million individuals in the UK. And that gives us access and visibility to billions of events across millions of websites every year. So we get that information on consumers and what they're visiting, what the search patterns look like, what the clickstream patterns look like, and we extrapolate that to give us a clear representation of the internet population and how they are using the web. So what we've done in the last 18 months is we've fused that data to our offline consumer insights data. And that really gives us the ability to see the audience behind the online behavior. And what it gives you the ability to do is really kind of understand at a profile level who it is that you are trying to target. And ultimately, it helps you have a good look at things like what that audience has in terms of brand preferences, in terms of media consumption, and in terms of what life stage decisions they might be looking at.
Sorry, Christian just stepped out for a moment. Sorry, this is Emma Moorman. I'm the Senior Product Manager, just taking over here. So the final piece then for Hitwise is around activating audiences. So we take the market analysis for the UK, the deep consumer insights that we fuse together, and allows you as marketers to be able to target these audiences and activate upon them. So it's really about finding those best audiences in the right place at the right time and getting the right message to them. So it's really about meaningful connections and actual insights.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. If you can get to the next slide. So our speakers today, so I've introduced myself, I'm the follically challenged chap on the left. In the middle, we have Emma, who is the lead architect on fusing that consumer insight data to our panel and also building out the audience view platform where this data sits on. And on the right-hand side, we've got Andy Mulcahy, who's the editor of IMRG, and we're delighted to have him join us today as well. So 4 sections in the agenda today. The first one, we're going to have a retrospective look at 2016. and really just understand the key things that we can learn from that. The second thing we'll do is we'll look at 2017, and this really is the advisory section to give you our opinion and analysis on what we think is going to happen. We'll then summarise in the third section just a little bit about what the most salient points are so that we're getting those key messages home. And then the fourth section is going to be on the Q&A itself. Okay, so let's have a look at 2016. And the first thing that we're looking at here is there's two sets of data. One is visits data, which is the dark blue, and then we've got the sales growth, which has come from IMRG in the light blue. And the period is October, November, and December 2016, Q4, obviously the build up to the festive season. And what we can see is quite an obvious trend in high growth, high opportunity coming through in October and November. When we lifted the lid on this data, we could see quite clearly that there was a split down by category and also by type of audience as well. So it might be a good one for you to get in touch with because there's some quite interesting pieces of information in there. Okay, so this is the same period in a line graph, obviously, and it's rather than month, we're breaking it down by week as well. So I'm not going to go into too much detail right now about what sits behind these weeks and what's driving it, but the three areas that we're going to focus on are the week that's building up to Cyber Week, which is the week ending the 19th. That saw an 8% growth over 2015. Black Friday in Cyber Week was actually 2% down, but the week overall was 2% up. And we saw quite a big uptick on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the build up to Black Friday. And then Christmas week, Boxing Day, it butts the trend of recent years. So there's been quite a big spike there as well, which we're going to have a look at. So now I'm going to hand over to Andy. He's going to tell us a little bit about what he thinks is behind the Cyber Week trend.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So you've seen that things are getting earlier. We all know that. You know that from your experience. Why are people doing stuff earlier? Well, the obvious answer is it's really not rocket science. It's retailers are doing stuff earlier and they're telling people that it's time to shop earlier in the month. And we've got some data on the screen that's going to show you that. So what that's showing you is the top 75 retailers according to a list that we put together. And you can see that on Monday the 14th, already there's 43 retailers who are either actively pushing Black Friday deals or they've got something very prominent on their homepage that says we're going to do it in 5 days, so watch out sort of thing. There's obviously a big uptick as you get to Black Friday. Black Friday is the peak and then you get falling away. But you can clearly see that there's a hell of a lot of activity that's driving up to it. If we consider what that means from a sales growth perspective, the red line there is showing you the year-on-year growth for the Black Friday week versus the same week in 2015. And Friday to Monday, it's a lower growth rate, but it's still very respectable in the sort of 12 to 18% range kind of thing, building from a low base. But earlier in the week, it's much higher. So you can see on the Monday of that week, for example, it's about 34%. And that's 34% as an average, by the way. So some people, absolutely astronomical growth around that time. And that's because people launched earlier, so it's not, it's quite obvious. The final thing that I want to point out about that week is that that was week 3 of November, according to our index classification, which accounted for 35% of the sales in November. So that would tell you that that's the time to do it because that's when people are buying. But are they buying then because, as we've just seen, retailers have launched all their stuff? And there's a big upturn in activity in that week. So is there actually a week when it will happen? Or if everybody was to launch en masse the week before, would that suddenly shift to the week before? Or is that too early for Christmas? And I suppose the other interesting thing to consider there is Black Friday the same as Christmas, or is it actually its own kind of thing that's actually separate from it?
Okay, so staying on Cyber Week, let's just have a quick look at the top 10 online retailers for that week, and they take up a fairly sizable 46% of online retail share. And we're not, I mean, we're going to go into a couple of examples, a couple of retailers later on, so I'm not going to dwell on any individuals too much here, but what we've really looked at is, we can't go without mentioning Amazon, of course. During Cyber Week, they were actually down 3%, but their 12-day sale, which includes Cyber Week, was actually up 5%. So as a strategy, going early worked for Amazon, and it seemed to have worked for a couple of other retailers as well. The other notable thing here as well is just the level of variance. We have a plus 24 all the way down to a minus 16. And when you look under the lid of the data of these retailers, we can obviously see that it's driven by promotions for sure, but also the multi-channel strategy that they've used as well. So there's quite a lot up for grabs here, and it's quite a nice segue into my next slide, which is showing. So again, it's Cyber Week 2016 over 2015, and we're looking here at we've got the kind of the big bulk of the retail players on the left-hand side, the department stores and the apparel and accessories. They're fairly flat or modest growth. But what we saw that was quite interesting was that the specialist players, particularly in house and garden and health and beauty, grew 14% and 18% respectively. And we actually saw quite a lot of disrupted brands coming through as well. So what we're reading into this, that these specialists and these new emerging brands are, they're really catching up and tuning in on Cyber Week and making quite significant headway. And stepping into the predictions a little bit, I think we'll see that trend continue. Okay, so let's leave Cyber Week and go on to Christmas week itself. And the area that we just watched focus on today was Boxing Day. So we've got the 3 years here, 2014, 15, and 16. And in particular, the piece that we're looking at is a 45% rise in online retail visits, 2016 over 2015, the dark blue bit. And one of the things that we're looking at here, and we think it's hopefully quite useful to point out, is that in 2015, Boxing Day was on a Saturday, and it was quite a benign 15 degrees. It was the warmest Boxing Day since 1910. So we think that Saturday being a habitually quite strong offline day, and the fact that it was nice and warm probably led to a much lower online visits number. If we then contrast that with 2016, it was actually on a Monday, and it was a much more seasonal 8 degrees. And Monday, if you're looking at days of the week for online visits, tends to be the highest, if not one of the highest of the week. So we think that at least a contribution to the 2016 jump was a day of the week and the temperature. Obviously, in 2017, we've got no idea what the temperature is going to be like or the weather's going to be like, but we do know that it's on a Tuesday. And so if we're making a prediction there, I would probably say that it's going to be, the trend will be closest to 2016 than it was to 2015. And when you're looking at the numbers involved here, that's probably quite a useful point to make.
Never underestimate the impact of the British weather, I think, is the lesson there. Okay,
so what we've got here, again, we're comparing the 2 years, 2016, 2015, and we're looking at the relative difference for Cyber Week and for Christmas Week. And the trend that you're seeing in that right-hand column, the relative difference column, is that the reliance on search, social, and print, is growing over those peak weeks. And there's not much of a surprise there because they're fairly trusted channels. However, what we did see was that some retailers are going against this trend, in particular on email. So ostensibly, it looks like the trend is going one way, which it is, but actually that doesn't necessarily mean that you should follow the trend to find the opportunity. Going against the grain could get quite interesting. Okay, right, we can't have a digital webinar without talking about mobile versus desktop. In 2016, it was well publicised that mobile overtook desktop for the first time, and the main growth in mobile, intimate apparel and health and beauty splits around about 60% mobile, 40% desktop, and apparel and house and garden is about 55% mobile and 45% desktop. The reason that this is interesting to particularly focus in on these 4 categories is that mobile conversion is up about 11% year on year for this period, and it's rapidly shifting. So we think that these are probably quite hot categories for mobile conversion. People are getting a lot more comfortable with purchasing on their mobile devices, and we think that that's probably going to accelerate quite significantly. Okay, right, the last point on 2016. So on the left-hand side, we've got the hot products from 2016, the Hatchimals, which was on the Hitwise hot product list and at number 1. We had the Renaissance and the Nintendo Classic, Amazon Fire Stick and Echo Dot did well, and the Fitbit once again did really well. We're here in the middle of the year. Everybody must have heard of the fidget spinner by now and probably either bought a fan or thinking about buying a fan with it with the Great British Summer that we're having. And technology, consoles and phones and so on are, as always, quite hot products. When we start thinking about what's coming up in 2017, we could probably predict the top 5 or top 10 relatively easy just by picking up some some glosses or reading it in the newspaper. We know what they're going to be, but when we looked in the data on the search terms, we see a great big long tail of fast-moving search terms, in particular products, in terms of what's in demand. So we would encourage delegates to start thinking about looking at long tail search and what that generic view looks like across your competitors or other retail categories. And what's interesting is, for example, if a consumer comes onto your site, buys a product, then leaves, goes to another competitor site, or a non-traditional competitor, buys another product, is there a cross-sell opportunity for you to actually think about your buying and merchandising and really kind of digging into what that long-tail search data is telling you. We also think there's a good opportunity for it influencing your offline decisions as well. So when we've started to break down the audiences and look at the demographics, it's different between London and Birmingham and Edinburgh or Glasgow or whatever. So there's some really good opportunities, we think, in digital data to be able to start informing offline a bit more. So that's a wrap-up of 2016. I'm going to hand over to Emma now, who's going to take us through, Emma and Andy, for the opinion analysis for this year.
Thanks, Christian. So the second section now is to look at the kind of key questions to be asking ourselves for 2017, so taking into account what we've seen over 2016. So I guess the kind of key areas that we've learned in 2016 is that we know the promotions are starting earlier and they're lasting longer, and they don't appear to be cannibalising sales or visits, but just extending the peak period that we see. We've seen an uptick in more category specialists entering into Cyber Week. It's not just a tech sales space now. We're seeing the uptick in home and garden, intimate apparel, etc. We know that online activity is rapidly shifting onto mobile, so there's a new opportunity there, or continued opportunity. And finally, we know that multi-channel approach is needed desperately to seek out from the pack and thinking about how and where you're going to attack that. So with that in mind, the areas that we're going to talk through in this section is about the impact we can make in 2017. And the 4 key areas we're going to look at is around your planning, your content strategy, your channel strategy, and the retailer strategy as well. So first up, the first section is planning. So how and when should I plan promotions and discounts? So thinking about what we saw in 2016 and what data we have available to us, what opportunities we have. And I think the first thing is that search is undeniably the most important online indicator for us for audience intent, and it begins to demonstrate to us the ways in which people are thinking, when particular searches become front of mind, and how we can use that to really talk to people at the right time. What we're looking at on this slide is groups of kind of key topics, key search terms around this period, so from Black Friday through to gifts and click and collect. And what we're looking is those kind of indicators of when these search terms start to ramp up. So we think about that extension and when we want to start planning, when we want to start communicating and how to talk to people. And what we see in the data is that from the very beginning of October is when Black Friday and searches actually begin to ramp up, so well ahead of the Cyber Week period. And as we move through to the beginning of November is when people are starting to switch their mind into gifting, thinking about the Christmas period as well. And then finally, towards the end of November, we see the uptick in searches around click and collect. So we can see that shifting of mind into actually delivery options and actually that final purchase. And interestingly, over in the kind of industry sections, we see rising activity mid-November for rewards and directories. So people thinking about, the best deals, the discount codes. And then to the beginning of December, that sharp increase, same as we see with click and collect, we see that sharp increase in activity around freight and storage and thinking about delivery again as well. So the so what here is really starting to think about your potential audience when they're beginning to search online, and to tailor your product and your content accordingly. We're obviously looking at kind of key search terms here, just generally around Black Friday, but if we were to look at this by product, we'd be sure to see some quite interesting insights come out of this. And I think with that in mind, when we see those kind of early searches happening, is starting to understand who are these people that are engaging so early in Black Friday and those kind of gifting search terms, etc. And what we're looking at on this slide is just looking at those people who are searching for Black Friday, and we can see that real kickoff happening in September. And what we actually see is that those early searches tend to be much younger, they tend to be more male dominated. But what's interesting, what's important for all of us to take away is how this starts to shift over the Cyber Week and through into the Christmas period. And what we see is that the male audience and the kind of younger audience begin to decline. And it's actually through into October that we start to see a female audience growing and a much older audience as well picking up that share. So again, we're looking at this from a kind of a very kind of 20,000 foot view, but if you were again beginning to create audiences around specific products and beginning to see what those shifts were in terms of audience demographics, you could really start to think about that planning, that conversation, that content that's really going to resonate with that group. The next piece we can look at, this is a great piece of data, is thinking about the kind of the right message at the right time in the right place. And what we're looking at here is audience behaviour around laptop searches. And in the top section, we're looking at activity for people searching for laptops, activity around research and review sites. This is when people are really trying to make their decisions. They're looking for information to back up their purchase decision. And then the second in the blue is when people are actually demonstrating activity around purchase. They're actually at the shopping, the retail sites, and they're looking to convert on purchase of a laptop. And what we see really interestingly is the green being that peak of activity and the red being that much lower activity, is we see people searching for laptops really peaking right up until that beginning of November period. Really kind of researching, looking at kind of blogs, other kind of IT media sites. And then very clearly we can see that for the shopping sites, that red starts to shift over to green as people start making their purchase decisions. And so what this says to you, whether you sell laptops or not, is starting to think about the types of products you do sell, and start to think about when we see customers move from that research period into the purchase decision period, and how you can make sure your content and your messages are in the right place and you're feeding that audience need at that time when you've got that right research content out there. So the key actions then really from this section for planning is that the creep is likely to stay in 2017, so it's absolutely about planning early and spreading the duration, but really understand that target audience, who is that early searcher, that early adopter, and how can you influence your planning strategy to meet that. And how do those profiles shift over time? So it's not kind of one audience that's going to last you through the Cyber Week through to Christmas, but actually how you can update that message to capture that audience and really target them with the right timeliness. Now I'll pass you over to Andy to take a look at content.
Okay, thanks Emma. What I want to do here is spend a bit of time looking at marketing campaigns, because I think that the opportunity for innovation is absolutely ripe. And I'm going to illustrate that by showing you a few different approaches. What you're looking at here is modern Christmas marketing, basically. These are stills from video advertising. So top left is John Lewis, it's that box of the dog thing from a couple of years ago. Top right is House of Fraser. They have this kind of dance routine going on. Bottom left is a load of ice skating Yetis, which Argos did, and Miss Claus, which was an MS thing. Now, the important thing to bear in mind about this is that it's TV advertising. You do see it on the TV, but it's designed for the modern world. It's socially shareable stuff. So this is designed to be blasted all over YouTube and millions of views and get passed around. They spend a lot of time doing it. It's got storylines. It's got all sorts of things with it, and that's why you get roller skating Yetis, because people will share that sort of stuff. By contrast, somewhat, is Black Friday marketing, and that is uniformly what it is. And to be fair, it is people indicating that they're going to do a Black Friday sale. So at the moment we're in summer sale, and you will commonly see something very similar to that, but it will say summer sale instead. So that's fine, because all you're doing is you're indicating that you're participating, basically. The issue with Black Friday is the scale of the thing. Black Friday is a universal thing that everyone gets engaged in. A summer sale is something that you kind of own. And to illustrate the problem with this, I picked up a copy of the Metro on Black Friday last year, and there were 35 different adverts in there, which all looked exactly like that, more or less. So while it serves its purpose, you're telling people that you're doing a Black Friday sale. You're basically saying to them, come to my website. It's a problem because everybody's doing exactly the same thing. And as a reader of the paper, you just see all this stuff. It looks exactly the same. No one's standing out at all. And you can't help but wonder, if someone did something just slightly different, how much more attention they'd be able to get. But it's not just about stuff in newspapers. I just want to show you a few examples of people doing innovative stuff. So this was Lidl last year, and they ran a campaign where it was all done through social, and they basically said that the more you tweet about a product, the more the price comes down a bit. So the example here is a lobster which dropped down to £2.99. You had to go down to the shop to pick it up, which is an ambitious strategy if you think about what happened in 2014 with people fighting over TVs, etc. I thought we were done with in-store Black Friday, but there you go. But it was massively successful for them. They sold 40,000 lobsters in a single day. So it's a really engaging idea. It's a bit different. It is discounting, but it got picked up by media because it was a bit different. And this was radically different. This was the Whiskey Exchange. And what they did, instead of slashing prices, they actually put them up. But it was successful for them because their audience is kind of whiskey, I was going to say addicts, that's perhaps not fair, people who are really into whiskey. There was a range that they discontinued in 2010, and they brought back a selected group of them. So as you can see at the bottom of that, there was 420 of them, and they sold a lot, and they bumped up the price. So to be fair, they did get criticised for bumping the prices up, for being a little bit opportunistic, shall we say? But this is Black Friday. Let's be honest. But it did work for them. So they found something that would work for them, and they did it, and they really pulled it off. And their customers were probably very happy with that because they liked lots of different whiskies. So the key things here, and the thing that I've really been banging on about, I suppose, is that the opportunity for innovation is absolutely ripe. If someone just does something even slightly different, you can really see how they could grab a lot of attention. The scale of Black Friday is why it's so different to any other kind of sales period. Everybody knows at that period that everybody's looking at retail sites, looking at what you're doing. So the more imaginative you can be, the more you can stand out. So just think about what would work for you, what would work for your brand, what would work for your customers, and what would work for your proposition. And if you can come up with something good, you can really get leagues ahead of the competition.
Thanks, Andy. So we've taken a look at the planning, we've taken a look at some content opportunities as well. So the next section we'll just look at is channels. So thinking about how we can drive traffic to sites over those peak periods. And I think the first kind of call out here, and the most important thing for people, is being as granular as you possibly can be. So every hour is important over the peak trading period. So much fluctuates during this time, daily, hourly basis, products change, audience shifts. So the granularity in the data will be absolutely key, and your ability to respond to that, your ability to be agile will be absolutely critical. So the first thing that we'll to look at is just understanding those peak hours of the different key channels, referral channels through to the retail industry. And what we see is that search is by far the most popular channel over Cyber Week. It's kind of no big surprises there. What we tend to see with search is that it peaks into the evening from 6 p.m. To 10 p.m. On Black Friday itself, it keeps a kind of a good momentum all day with a little bit of a peak in the evening. But search can be costly and it is saturated, so retailers do need to think about the kind of multi-channel approach. And so I think the big call-outs to really be looking at are around email, print media, rewards, and social. And when we take search out of those key referring channels, we do see that social is by far the next biggest referral through to retail, and it tends to follow the same pattern as search. We see those peaks up in the evening from 6 to 10 p.m. And then after that, we can see rewards as kind of the next peak. And what we see with rewards is that they had this huge surge on the Thursday evening, and then again quite consistently through Black Friday as well. Whereas email conversely tended to pick up in the morning from 9 o'clock, obviously as people coming into the office, logging in. And so from kind of your perspective, things to be looking at here is in terms of those kind of peak hours of behaviour is, one is thinking about picking up on that opportunity, but also thinking about what you could do a little bit differently to stand out from the crowd. And I have a couple of examples of retailers who've done just that and been very successful. So first up is Amazon, who they completely buck the trend in terms of the industry average for email referral. So as I said, we tend to see that email is kind of that early morning into the industry average, into the afternoon. Whereas Amazon, as you can see by those dotted squares, is really picking up a lot of early morning traffic through from the emails. And the average here, the industry average is taking Amazon out, so we can really see how differently they're performing. So something to think about there is, how agile you can be, what differences you can make with your campaign to really attract audience attention at a different time. The second example is Argos, who did some things a little bit differently to from the rewards referrals as well. So we saw that Argos was consistently picking up a lot of the traffic from rewards. They were over-indexing, overperforming compared to the industry, and they saw kind of that year-on-year growth to their website that Tuesday to Thursday, and received a much higher proportion of the clicks from the rewards channels through Tuesday, Wednesday midday, and through to Thursday evening. So again, it's just demonstrating that while there is that industry average there, there's every opportunity to do things a little bit differently and to still gain that market share. So I think the key actions from this perspective, thinking about channel, is really understand the peak hours of each channel. Think about where the opportunities are for you. Maybe look a little bit closer within your very specific industries, whether it's apparel or it's home and garden. Start to understand what the trends are around there. Think about those optimal hours when you're thinking about your multi-channel campaign. Perhaps don't think of it as one blast, but start to think about when your opportunity is for social, when your real opportunity is for email. And take a look at what your competitors are doing. If you can, track that hourly share, see what fluxes are happening, and be as agile and responsive as you can within that period. There's some real opportunities for wins within there. So the final kind of question for this section then is around the retailer strategy, and this one is around how should I allocate my spend on Amazon versus Google. And I think undoubtedly for kind of any retail company on this webinar is either impacted or influenced by Amazon and Google in some way, whether you're a manufactured brand selling into, or your competitor is selling into Amazon, or whether you're a multi-retailer. And if you're a brand, your key question will be around, should I be selling through Amazon? Should I be looking to create more direct channel? How can I can gain on that kind of product demand? And likewise, if you're a retailer, is really thinking about where Amazon is getting those sales from and what people are searching for. What's the spillover? What's the opportunity for you as well? So we've had a little look into the data, and just as a kind of like a top level, we see that Amazon accounted for around 25% of all the visits to the shopping and classified. And Google's by far the largest referring site, accounting for 39% of all the traffic going to shopping and classified. So both big proportions in their own rights. The one that really stood out for me was in terms of the search for products. So 55% of the online population use Google to search for products. It's kind of a no-brainer, but what I was really intrigued to see with Amazon is around 16% of the online population use Amazon just to search for their products to begin with, which is an enormous proportion of opportunity there, thinking about the ways in which people are using that search behaviour. And when we go behind that, what we start to see is the differences in the product demand versus Google versus Amazon. And what we saw is that within Google was much higher branded product searches compared to Amazon that tended to be much more generic product searches. So when we looked at those top 100 search terms done on Google, we saw a lot more branded search terms around games and products and phones, whereas on Amazon we were seeing much more generic searches around electronics and accessories as well. So fairly big proportion. Dropping a little bit further behind that, just having a look at the branded searches, you can see on the left-hand side, red is Amazon, orange is Amazon and Google, and green is just Google searches. And on the right-hand side, those generic searches, again, same color code. And what we can instantly see is that for branded search terms, things like the Amazon Fire Stick, The Walking Dead, Minecraft, there's a much higher proportion owned by Google in terms of where people are searching for product and brand. And transversely, when we look at the generic search terms and we look at the likes of headphones, just generic tablet searches, earphones, etc., Amazon absolutely dominates in that search space. So some kind of big takeaways there. It's worth pointing out that we're looking at just kind of overall top 100 searches. Hitwise can go into more detail. We can look at specific portfolios, so we can start to understand within particular product sets the differences behind those search terms. And I think the other important call out is, again, coming back to that audience idea, is which audiences are driving these behaviours in the two search engines between Google and Amazon. And just from looking at these top 100, what we really saw was that Amazon only was really skewing towards a slightly older female audience, whereas Google was skewing towards a much younger audience. So again, this is top 100 search terms, but we could be looking at your specific portfolio, and we could be understanding the audience behaviour between those two. Some really interesting actions you can take out the back of that. So I think the wrap up here is understanding how your customer behaviour differs between Amazon and Google, thinking about allocating your spend accordingly and to product demand. And I think just one final thought is with the Google Shopping, thinking about what or how this might actually impact shopping behaviour. I don't think we kind of really know yet what impact it might have, but what we kind of perceive might be issue is when Google might have to allow price comparison sites and the likes of eBay and Amazon to come into that Google Shopping, is that consumers might find a drop in UX where traditionally now they can just one click, bam, they're straight into a retailer site for purchase. Is it's likely to take them down a channel where they're going to have to make more product selection and more product decisions. So it's one to kind of bear in mind, one to think about as we move into the 2017 period.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to part C, which is a really short section. It's really just to cover the most salient points from the first two parts of the webinar. So first up, key points looking back at 2016. I'm going to probably bring in the first and second points together. The first one around understanding that consumer journey, and I think the laptop example really kind of brought this to life. Looking at the types of media, in that instance it was IT media, print media, looking at the blog sphere, how do those influence that consumer journey? And also there's a really big opportunity for retailers to be starting to bring audience into that perspective. There were definitely stark differences when you looked at the demographics between on products for different types of audiences. So knowing where to be and when to be there is in the data, and it's very accessible. The third point in reviewing the 2016 data as well, I would say, is the gap analysis between you and your competitor. So basically, what are they doing that you're not? And having a look at that area, in particular by channel, I think will be probably a pretty good area to spend some time on in terms of potential targeting. Okay, so planning for 2017. I mean, we covered it in a few different parts of the webinar around looking at search data and how that can be helping you to cross-sell by looking at products that maybe you're are not in your merchandising or product portfolio, thinking about the geolocation and the effect that that could have on the offline piece as well. Emma was just mentioning there around the differences in audience between Amazon and Google, Amazon being the older female, Google tending to be a little bit younger. When you're looking at a product level and building out those portfolios, or thinking about your search strategy, there's clearly some quite strong spend efficiencies in there, and some opportunities to choose the right channel. And then the third part on here, which is the one that Andy in particular was stressing, was that nothing really stands out at the moment. I particularly like the Lidl example. There's a lot of opportunity to be innovative and creative, along with looking at the data, thinking about what will resonate with what types of audience. And then the final piece is, I mean, it was really there in that hourly data piece. It's the more agile you are. I think Emma used the term granular as well. If you really look at this, there is opportunities, certainly to connect to your audience and disrupt the competitive flow and have a look at competitive conquesting. Looking at the optimal hours by channel, the Amazon and the Argos example. Potentially think about going against the grain where you think you might be able to kind of capitalise. And when is peak for your peer group? When is peak for the products that you're leading on, or the promotions you're leading on? And then the final point being the ability to track and react to what's happening with your competitor group. The ability to get low latency data and be able to really kind of see what's going on a lot quicker is more around today. The ability is there today a lot more than it used to be. So there is a really good opportunity to build in something into your plans around being able to react as close to on the fly as possible. So I think we're done on the presenting, and we're now going to move on to the Q&A section. I think we're going to start off with this question, is that right? Yeah. So I'm going to read out one. I think the type of questions I'm going to go towards are probably the kind of more macro style questions. Anyone who's asked a question will get back to them, especially the more specific ones as well. So hopefully this is the right order to go in. So the question we've got here is, with the political mood in the UK due to Brexit, do you think the retail industry will be affected in the festive season?
Big bad Brexit. I suppose it always has to come up. I know quite a lot about it because I'm sad to say that I've written extensive reports on it. It's a thankless task, don't do it. And I'll answer that in two ways, really. One is that we know there's quite a lot of stuff that's happened, and the second is that we haven't got a clue. So what kind of Brexit means for retail, if you like, it means something pretty significant because the pound tanked. What we've tracked post-Brexit is a big increase in the volume of orders that are going to cross-border destinations. Now, that number that goes to overseas destinations isn't the same all through the year. It does fluctuate as the year goes along. What we've tracked is the pattern is exactly the same, but it's about 5 percentage points higher than it would be, we would expect it to be. So there's a load more going cross-border because basically people in those markets are able to get stuff cheaper because their currency's suddenly stronger. Another thing that we noticed was that there's a greater proportion going to non-EU destinations than EU. That's the way we kind of split it. By non-EU, you can read US, I think, into that because the dollar gained more against the pound than the euro did. So it's all quite obvious stuff that you would expect, but it's very trackable and happening. The third thing is that shoppers in other markets are going to .co.uk sites for UK retailers, even where they might have a local domain in one of those sites, so a .fr site in France, for example. And the reason being that the shoppers there want to pay in British pounds so that they get the beneficial exchange rates. So you've also got this issue of inflation, of course, which is already biting in food. A lot of retailers hedged their currencies, but it will probably have lapsed, I think, for a lot of them come Christmas. So yeah, it's a testy time. That being said, the political instability in the world is pretty big at the minute, and it's not to say that this stuff is all one-way traffic. The US is a pretty volatile place at the minute, and you could see the pound recover against it. So this is the piece where I say I don't know what's going to happen, because what Brexit actually means is yet to be defined, and it's all based around the government's performance, really, in the coming months and years, because it's all got to be negotiated. No one's got any idea at all what's going to happen. My guess is that by Christmas we probably wouldn't be any clearer. Come about March time next year, it might be a bit clearer, and markets will react to that, of course.
I think as well, just another kind of angle on that is thinking about the political mood and thinking about the ways in which we're communicating and the kind of content and creative strategies we're using. I think there is something to be said around looking kind of in the search data, that kind of audience intent data, to see the ways in which people are kind of feeling about things and thinking about things. And when we're thinking about kind of those creative strategies, if there's opportunity there to kind of capture moods, reassurance or security, obviously we don't see, we're not looking at kind of that piece yet for the kind of Christmas period, but just to give you kind of an example of what I mean by this is, looking within the travel industry at the moment, we can certainly see a higher number of search terms around kind of concern around security, around terrorism, and that's kind of front of mind for people. We're seeing search terms around flight versus trains, and I think if we can start tracking those types of things for kind of the retail industry, there is an opportunity to think about that kind of assurance and that kind of hook that we can use with people to kind of reassure. It could be that Christmas becomes a time for kind of family and security and stability, and we want to kind of demonstrate those messages through our sales.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to pick another one here. It's also it's a little bit macro. So, have you tracked an increase in consumer cynicism around Black Friday deals?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that. We have got a bit of data on that we've done shopper surveys where we do have a little bit of that. So if you, my email will be on the next slide. You can drop me a note if you want to see that research. So we've tracked a bit, but the people who absolutely fundamentally have tracked it is which, as in which question mark, the consumer group. So in 2015, for 4 months over the covering the Black Friday period, what they did is they tracked the daily price fluctuations of 178, I think it was, products, and then looked at which were the cheapest available for that period on Black Friday, and only 88 of them, so just around about half, were actually cheapest on that day. So they then went on BBC Breakfast the week before Black Friday 2016 and announced that. And of course, the thing is that the sort of language that comes out of that is that it's basically a lie. Black Friday is a lie. We're telling people that they're going to get stuff really cheap. It's best of year value. And actually, the research that Which did kind of exposed that a bit. And I think that's quite problematic, because how many people saw that broadcast? I'm not sure. Were people even aware of it? Were you aware of it, for example? But I've seen feedback from a retailer who emailed some of their customer base asking, why didn't you shop with us on Black Friday? And the sort of feedback they got were, it's a con, it's a lie, I can get better deals at other times of year. It's basically the exact kind of language that would have come out of Which's report, which suggests to me that it has actually got out to people and they are kind of aware of it. So, so with that in mind, I would say that cynicism, I mean, it got off to a bad start in 2014. I know it's not the first Black Friday that ever happened, but it's always had this kind of image problem, Black Friday, and I don't think it's really, recovered from it. I think now it's probably, following that Which expose, I think it's probably in a worse place than it ever really has been.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Okay, all right. So we slightly overran on the presenting time. We do have probably about another dozen questions, which we're going to get back to the individuals who submitted those. But I think we just want to wrap up with a couple of extra points if we can. So just in terms of getting in touch with us, our details are up on screen, as you can see. So either your account manager or the contact us email address that was up at the beginning. Please do get in touch with any specific questions that we can help to do with your planning. There is case studies on the website, there is use cases, anything that else that you'd want to get hold of, then please either go to the site or, like I say, get in touch with us. I think Andy wanted to mention.
Yes, so we've got a paper that we authored, which is preparing for peak, where there's lots and lots of information. Some of the bits that I've covered today in much more detail. And you can get a copy of that on our website, imrg.org. So go and download that if it's interesting.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for your time. I hope you found the session useful, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.